Kwekwe, hello, greetings, Sego. My God, this is fabulous. Kwekwe means hello in Algonquin-rooted languages, and Sego, to honor my beautiful friend. Skawanati here is Haudenosaunee language, the Mohawk language. So thank you, Krista. Thank you so much for the introduction. Super excited to be here as a social and cultural entrepreneur. I'm going to raise this a little bit. I just want to set up the tapestry for the work that you're all going to be doing and that you do every day. And that's to give a voice through art. In Canada, Indigenous people, just like in the United States, were subject to colonialism. And from 1876 to 1951, all cultural practice and artistic practices for First Nations in Canada was made illegal. The assimilation policies, the Indian Act, you can read up on it, made 100% of First Nations invisible in the cultural dialogue of this country. Imagine removing that cultural lens off your camera and having that black space. So I want to share my story with you as an Indigenous person that comes from the Giskabigiyag community of the Mi'kmaq Nation. My vision of a better world became clear in 2011 during a contract that Canada Arts Council asked me to do. And it brought me on a 280,000 square kilometer trek, mapping Indigenous communities of Quebec and Labrador. As I traveled from one community to the next, I paid attention to the stories, and I especially paid attention to the voices that shared them with me. Every artifact, every creation, every tale, every song safeguards Indigenous people's worldview, along with the practical artistic legacies essential for survival, a way of thinking, a unique way of being, all closely related to the land and carefully carried forward for future generations. This journey changed my life forever, and I needed to honor the deep-rooted understanding that the stories, the land, and the people were one. There was an urgency and the necessity to give it sustainable life for our future generations. I saw the world as it was meant to be, a world where cohesion, inclusion, and equity would govern a space for exchanges and bring human awareness of cultural pluralities and reach, little by little, an inclusive society where all the voices from the land would be heard. During my travels, I also felt the rage rise when I observed the gap between conditions of Indigenous populations and those of Canadian populations. Exclusion, insufficient resources for education, and severe life issues with impacts on their health, violence, and high suicide rates. I observed this and felt the profound pain and scars of colonialism, displacement, oppression, and the impacts of the assimilation policies. I wept for the interruption of our history, for the extinction of so many stories that were lost forever. I wept for the silent voices that died before being heard. I sat there feeling my heartbeat, thump, 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 pounding like a drum, reminding me that I was alive and that I could make a difference. After all, I was a woman. Thank you. A mother, a daughter, a teacher. I carried within me the intergenerational knowledge and understanding that it takes to build a better world for our children, for the next 7 generations. Indigenous creators and traditional knowledge carriers are the pulse of communities and the revitalization of tradition and inspirational leaders for our children. It is time to gather the shattered pieces and gift them life and make room for the voices to resurge. Speak your truth. It is the most powerful tool we have. And live your truth is the most powerful vector for change. Let us hear your voices, all voices. That's what shifted my life. I refer to myself as a shift disturber. I'm one of those women that disrupts, that brings change, that forces the institutions to remove the colonial lens and to put on a cultural one, not from an anthropology perspective, but from the land. One of the things I realized when I was roaming the land, and I am sure in the three Americas, it's the same thing. You don't leave your community to learn about art. You don't go to university to figure out who you are. It comes from the land. Your DNA is connected to the land. It's connected to the narrative stories, the historical narratives that brought you here today. So I ask you to listen to the voices on the land whose people you're sharing with. And I invite you to bring in Indigenous curators in your institutions. It'll bring a different lens to how you see the world. And it's going to eliminate the us and them. I think it is time now to remove that systemic barrier, social barrier, cultural barriers, and make it a more inclusive experience. I'm not going to go on for too long. I just wanted to share with you that Indigenous people are visible. They're still alive. We're not the last of a dying race. I know you've all seen The Last of the Mohicans. We look like this in a contemporary 21st century framework. One of the jobs that we have to do is to break down barriers, but also stereotypes. Our population is the fastest growing in Canada. 50% of all our nations are under 25 years old. And that's important statistics if you're working in the arts and cultural revitalization and historical reclaimants. So I invite you to open your minds, open your hearts, and have a fabulous gathering for the next 2 days, 3 days. Oh, you're here for a while. And if you have a chance, I invite you to come and see the Ashugan Cultural Space, which is in the heart of Old Montreal. Ashugan means the bridge. 90% of all our Indigenous creators live above the 50th parallel, the creators that I work with. I work with over 91 Indigenous creators and 35 communities. In Quebec, we have 11 First Nations, 10 First Nations and an Inuit nation, making 11. Canada has 50 languages, Indigenous languages, 650 Indigenous communities. So all these wonderful voices need to have a space in our dialogue, in this conversation. So thank you so much. Chiniscomitun, Nyawa, merci. Bonne conférence. Have a fabulous conference.